The distress beacon pulsed crimson against the vast darkness of space, its desperate rhythm carrying across light years. Captain Mara Jensen stood motionless before the holographic display, the emergency signal reflecting in her steady gray eyes. The message was unmistakable in its simplicity. SOS. 3 short pulses. 3 long. 3 short. A plea as ancient as space travel itself. Source confirmed, Captain, announced Imani Cho, her technology scout. Ophiuchus Prime. Their distress call includes a text transmission. Our cities burn, civilians perish. Jensen nodded, her expression betraying nothing of the adrenaline now coursing through her veins. This wasn't unexpected. For months, the outer colonies had reported strange attacks, swift, brutal, and meticulously executed. The perpetrators left few survivors and fewer clues. Any response from the Galactic Council? Jensen asked, already knowing the answer. The usual bureaucratic delays, Cho replied, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. They're convening an emergency session to evaluate the appropriate response protocols. A short, humorless laugh escaped Jensen's lips. So they'll debate while people die. The year was 2475, and humanity had secured its place among the stars through sheer tenacity rather than a warm welcome. Earth, classified as a death world due to its high gravity, extreme weather patterns, and staggering biodiversity of predators, had produced beings the Galactic Peace Alliance viewed with equal parts fascination and trepidation. Humans were resilient beyond reasonable expectation, adaptable to conditions that would kill most sentient species, and possessed an uncomfortably high tolerance for pain and radiation. These traits made Earth's military forces uniquely qualified for missions other species considered suicidal. And so, despite the political maneuvering and thinly veiled xenophobia that characterized humanity's position in galactic affairs, when situations grew desperate enough, one phrase inevitably echoed through council chambers. Send the Deathworlders. Captain Jensen's direct line to Earth's embassy aboard the Galactic Council station chimed. The stern face of Admiral Wallace appeared, his expression grave beneath a shock of white hair. Captain, I've just received an emergency authorization from Earth Command, countersigned by our ambassador. Your team is to deploy immediately to Ophiuchus Prime. Council approval has been expedited. Jensen raised an eyebrow. Expedited typically meant Earth had leveraged one of its rare unilateral action clauses in their alliance treaty. Political capital they couldn't afford to spend frivolously. Understood, Admiral. What intelligence do we have on the situation? Fragmentary at best. Colony went dark approximately 16 hours ago. Then the SOS burst transmission. We have satellite imagery showing multiple urban centers under attack. Perpetrators unknown. But their technology signature doesn't match any recognized faction. Jensen nodded. Deployment timeline. Yesterday, Captain. We have 4 million civilians on that planet. I don't need to explain what's at stake. The connection terminated, and Jensen turned to her assembled team, the elite Deathworlder Task Force. Each member represented the pinnacle of Earth's specialized combat training. Individuals selected not just for physical prowess, but for their psychological resilience and adaptability. Gear up, she ordered. We jump in 30 minutes. Major Imani Cho immediately began downloading intelligence feeds, her neural implants processing data at speeds that made her eyes flicker behind specialized lenses. Her slender fingers twitched as she sifted through satellite imagery, communications logs, and fragmentary sensor readings from Ophiuchus Prime. Sergeant Rafe Singh, their heavy weapons specialist, was already checking his exoskeleton's hydraulic systems. Standing nearly 7 feet tall when fully equipped, the former Mumbai coastal defense operative had survived 3 hull breaches in previous missions. His dark humor was as legendary as his ability to carry weaponry that would require a small vehicle on most worlds. Let me guess, he rumbled. We're jumping into another catastrophe with minimal intel and unrealistic expectations. Would you have it any other way? Replied Dr. Li Wei as she methodically packed her advanced medical kit. The quiet efficiency of her movements belied the 6 doctorates she held in xenobiology, trauma surgery, and combat medicine. Where others saw impossibility, she saw puzzles to solve, whether in alien physiology or battlefield injuries. As the team prepared, Jensen retreated to her private quarters for the brief moments of solitude she always required before deployment. The room was Spartan, containing only essentials: a narrow bunk, a small desk with a terminal, and a single photograph. Earth's Lake Geneva at sunset. Mountains reflected in still waters. A reminder of what peace looked like. She activated her neural interface, allowing mission parameters to flow directly into her consciousness. Ophiuchus Prime, terraformed colony. Population 4.2 million, primarily agricultural with 4 major urban centers. Established 2398. Primary exports: pharmaceuticals derived from native flora, specialized alloys refined from the planet's unusual mineral composition. No significant military presence beyond standard colonial defense forces. Essentially defenseless against a coordinated attack. Jensen closed her eyes, visualizing the colony's layout, committing critical infrastructure points to memory. When she reopened them, her decision-making process had shifted. The calm, analytical state her trainers had once called her combat mind. As she exited her quarters, Ambassador Nora stood waiting in the corridor. The tall, elegant Galactic Council representative's presence was unexpected. Though technically a liaison to the Deathworlder squad, she rarely appeared before missions, preferring to manage political fallout rather than witness its causes. "Captain Jensen," Nora greeted, her voice carrying the musical cadence characteristic of her species. "The Council wishes me to accompany your team to Ophiuchus Prime." Jensen paused, evaluating the implications. "This is an active combat deployment, Ambassador, not a diplomatic excursion. Nevertheless, I have my orders. The Council requires first-hand observation of the situation." Nora's expression remained neutral, but Jensen caught the subtle tension in her posture. "Very well, but you'll remain on our vessel once we reach the system. I don't have resources to protect diplomats planetside." Nora inclined her head slightly. "Agreed, though I believe you'll find my presence useful." Jensen had no time to interrogate the cryptic response as the final deployment alert sounded. The team assembled at the hangar bay where their specialized craft waited. The Thanatos, a deep space insertion vessel designed specifically for Deathworlder operations. Unlike the sleek, elegant ships favored by most Alliance species, the Thanatos was angular and heavily armored, resembling nothing so much as a predatory bird rendered in titanium and carbon composites. As the team boarded, each member performed final equipment checks with practiced efficiency. Jensen took her command seat and initiated pre-launch protocols. "Departure clearance received," Cho announced from the navigation console. "Spatial jump calculations complete. Spatial engines at full capacity. Sync confirmed from engineering. Jump coils charged and stable." Jensen felt the familiar tension building in her chest, the moment before leaping into the unknown. "Launch sequence initiated. Prepare for spatial jump." The Thanatos disengaged from its docking clamps and accelerated away from the station. As they cleared the safety perimeter, Jensen gave the final command: "Execute spatial jump." Reality distorted around them as the ship tore through the fabric of space-time. The sensation was always unsettling, a moment of absolute stillness followed by the feeling of being stretched across infinite distance before snapping back into corporeality. Most non-human species couldn't tolerate the experience without heavy sedation. For Jensen's team, it was merely uncomfortable. They emerged in the Ophiuchus system 16 hours later, farther from their target than planned. Cho frowned at her instruments. Jump calculations were accurate, but something interfered with our exit vector. Detecting unusual spatial distortions throughout the system, Jensen studied the tactical display. Deliberate interference? Possibly. The pattern suggests artificial field disruptors rather than natural phenomena. How long to reach the planet? Cho's fingers danced across controls. At maximum sublight velocity, approximately 10 hours. Jensen nodded. Set course, Major Cho. I want continuous scans. If someone's manipulating spatial fields in this system, I want to know who and how. As the Thanatos accelerated toward Ophiuchus Prime, Jensen ordered the team to rest in shifts. They would need full alertness upon arrival. 8 hours into their approach, alarms blared through the ship. Jensen, who had been reviewing tactical scenarios, rushed to the bridge. Multiple incoming objects, Cho reported. Debris field appears to be fragments of orbital defense platforms and civilian vessels. The tactical display showed a cloud of wreckage directly in their path, spreading outward from the planet. Evasive maneuvers, Jensen ordered. Can we establish communication with the colony? Singh, who had taken the communications station, shook his head. All standard frequencies are being jammed. Wait, detecting fragmentary transmissions on an obsolete emergency bandwidth. Put it through. Static filled the bridge, punctuated by bursts of desperate voices. Under attack, unknown vessels in orbit. Civilian centers targeted. Help us. The transmission cut off abruptly. Last transmission origin, Jensen demanded. Northern Hemisphere, coordinates consistent with New Alexandria, their capital city. Cho answered. Jensen made her decision. We're going in. Dr. Wei, prepare for potential mass casualties. Singh, bring weapons systems to full readiness. Cho, find us the cleanest approach vector through that debris field. Ambassador Nora, who had remained silent until now, spoke from her observer's position. Captain, Council protocols dictate a full assessment before... With respect, Ambassador. Jensen interrupted. People are dying. Assessment can wait. The Thanatos accelerated toward the planet, maneuvering through the expanding cloud of orbital debris. Twice, they narrowly avoided collisions with larger fragments, the ship's structural integrity field straining against the impacts of smaller pieces they couldn't evade. As they penetrated the atmosphere, the true scope of the disaster became apparent. New Alexandria. Once a gleaming example of human architectural achievement, now burned. Columns of smoke rose from multiple sectors, and the city's defensive shield, designed to protect against natural disasters rather than military assault, flickered erratically. I'm detecting multiple attack craft, Cho reported. Unknown configuration, but their energy signatures suggest advanced weapons technology. Jensen studied the tactical display. Any identification signals? None. And their movement patterns are unusual, not standard military formations. Landing options. Cho highlighted a section of the city. Central Medical District still has power. Defensive perimeter appears intact. Take us in. Alert medical personnel to expect our arrival, if their communications are still functional. The Thanatos descended through layers of smoke, its stealth systems engaged to minimize detection. As they approached the designated landing zone, Jensen addressed her team one final time. Our primary objective is civilian evacuation and protection. Secondary objective is intelligence gathering on the attackers. We operate under Deathworlder Protocol 7, maximum force authorized against hostile entities, but absolute restraint around civilians. The ship touched down on a medical center landing pad. Through the viewports, they could see medical personnel rushing toward them, accompanied by colonial security forces in battered armor. Let's move, Jensen ordered. The team disembarked into chaos. The air was thick with smoke and the sharp ozone smell of energy weapons discharge. A colonial officer approached, his face streaked with soot and blood. Captain Jensen, Commander Reeves, Colonial Security, thank God you're here. Jensen nodded curtly. Situation report. We're overrun. The attack began 18 hours ago. They hit our orbital defenses first, then landed forces around all major population centers simultaneously. We've lost contact with the other cities. The attackers' identification? Reeves shook his head. Nothing in our databases. Humanoid, but definitely not human. They're well-equipped, energy weapons, personal shields, some kind of stealth technology. They're not just killing indiscriminately, They're taking prisoners, particularly from our research facilities. That detail caught Jensen's attention. Research? What kind? Agricultural genetics, primarily. We've been developing crops that can thrive in high radiation environments. Jensen exchanged glances with Dr. Wei, whose expression had grown concerned. Commander, I need your security forces to coordinate with Dr. Wei on civilian evacuation. My team will establish a defensive perimeter and gather intelligence on the attackers. As Reeves departed with Wei to organize the evacuation, Jensen deployed her team. Cho, I want drone surveillance of a 10-kilometer radius. Singh, set up heavy weapons at these choke points. She indicated positions on their tactical map. I'll lead a reconnaissance team to assess enemy strength and capabilities. Within an hour, Jensen had a clearer picture of their situation, and it was grim. The attackers had established strongholds throughout the city, using advanced jamming technology to disrupt communications and targeting sensors. Their tactics suggested both military training and intimate knowledge of human defense protocols. More disturbing were Cho's findings from captured enemy equipment. Captain, I've analyzed their communication devices. They're not just raiding, they're searching for something specific. References to Earth seed genes appear repeatedly in their transmissions. Jensen frowned. Seed genes? Biological weapons research? Uncertain. But they're concentrating forces around the agricultural research complex 3 kilometers north of our position. Jensen made her decision. We need to know what they're after. Singh, maintain the defensive perimeter with colonial forces. Cho, you're with me. We're going to infiltrate that research facility. Using the city's maintenance tunnels, Jensen and Cho made their way toward the agricultural complex, avoiding enemy patrols. The journey took nearly 2 hours, impeded by collapsed sections and occasional firefights with enemy scouts. When they finally emerged near the complex, the scene confirmed their worst fears. The facility was heavily guarded, with enemy forces systematically removing equipment and research materials to waiting transport vehicles. They're stripping the place, Jensen whispered as they observed from a concealed position. This isn't random looting. Cho adjusted her optical implants, zooming in on the operation. Those containers they're loading, biological storage units, and look at the markings. The containers bore the universal symbol for genetically modified organisms, alongside Earth's distinctive emblem. We need to get inside, Jensen decided. If they're after Earth-based biological materials, this goes beyond a simple raid. They waited until a supply vehicle approached the complex, then used their stealth technology to attach themselves to its undercarriage. Once past the perimeter, they detached and slipped into the facility through a maintenance entrance. The interior of the research complex was in disarray. Laboratories ransacked, equipment destroyed, and signs of violence everywhere. But the attackers' methodical approach was evident in the way certain sections remained untouched, particularly the secure storage areas. Captain, Cho called softly from a terminal she'd accessed. I've got partial research logs. This facility wasn't just developing radiation-resistant crops, they were exploring human genetic adaptability to extreme environments. Jensen's expression darkened. Weaponization potential? Significant. The research focuses on isolating the genetic factors that make humans uniquely resilient to conditions that would kill other species. Like Deathworlders, Jensen murmured. A sudden commotion from deeper in the facility interrupted them. Moving silently through the corridors, they came upon a scene that confirmed their suspicions. In what appeared to be the central vault, enemy forces were carefully extracting cryogenic storage units, each labeled with genetic classification codes. More shocking was the figure supervising the operation, a tall, elegant being whose features resembled Ambassador Nora's species, but with subtle differences that marked them as belonging to a splinter faction. The experimental conclave, Cho whispered. I thought they were just a political extremist group. Jensen's expression hardened. Apparently they've graduated to bioterrorism. The leader of the operation was speaking, its voice carrying the same musical quality as Nora's, but distorted by underlying menace. Secure all primary samples. The Council must never discover our presence here. Once the human genetic templates are extracted, destroy all evidence. Jensen had heard enough. She signaled Cho to retreat, and they made their way back through the facility, careful to avoid detection. Once clear of the immediate danger, Jensen contacted Singh. "Sergeant, situation update." Singh's voice came through their secure channel. "Evacuation proceeding, but slowly. Enemy forces are converging on the medical district. Dr. Wei reports 300 civilians secured aboard emergency transports, but at least 2,000 remain in the immediate area. We've identified the attackers, experimental conclave operatives. They're after human genetic research materials, possible bioweapons application." There was a momentary silence before Singh responded. "The conclave? That complicates things. If they're involved, this could go beyond Ophiuchus Prime." "Agreed. We need to accelerate the evacuation and secure evidence of their involvement. The Council won't act without proof." As they made their way back toward the defensive perimeter, Jensen's tactical assessment grew increasingly bleak. The Conclave forces were well-equipped and strategically positioned throughout the city. A direct confrontation would result in massive civilian casualties. "We need a diversion," she decided. "Something to draw their forces away from the evacuation zone." Cho studied the city schematic on her portable display. The planetary defense grid is offline, but its power core is still active. If we could trigger an overload sequence, the energy signature would register as a significant threat. "Location? Defense Command, 2 kilometers east of our current position." Jensen nodded. "That's our play. Contact Singh and Wei. They'll continue the evacuation while we redirect the Conclave's attention." They moved through the city with practiced stealth, avoiding enemy patrols and using the urban landscape to their advantage. Twice they encountered Conclave strike teams and were forced to engage in brief, violent skirmishes that left no survivors. Defense Command, when they reached it, was already occupied by Conclave forces. Jensen observed their deployment pattern and identified a weakness in their perimeter. Southeast service entrance, light security, probably because it leads to maintenance rather than command systems. Cho nodded. "I can hack their security from there. Create a diversion while you access the power core controls." The plan worked initially. Cho's technological expertise allowed them to penetrate the facility's security systems, triggering alarms in distant sectors that drew away many of the Conclave guards. Jensen made her way to the power core control room, eliminating the few remaining guards with silent efficiency. As she began the overload sequence, however, an unexpected complication arose. The facility's automated systems detected her actions and initiated a lockdown protocol. Worse, the commotion had alerted nearby Conclave forces, who were now converging on their position. "Cho, status," Jensen called through their comm link. "Security systems more sophisticated than expected," came the strained reply. "I've sealed the approaches to your position, but they're burning through, 2 minutes at most." Jensen worked frantically at the controls, bypassing safety protocols and rerouting power connections. The core began to emit a low, ominous hum as energy levels climbed. "Overload sequence initiated. 15 minutes to critical mass." "That's cutting it close," Cho responded. "Enemy forces breaching outer defenses now." Jensen secured her position, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. "Maintain your position as long as possible, then fall back to extraction point Alpha. I'll hold here until the sequence is irreversible." The first wave of Conclave soldiers breached the inner security doors 3 minutes later. Jensen met them with precision fire from her modified pulse rifle, the weapon's energy bolts penetrating their personal shields through sheer concentrated power. For 5 tense minutes, she held the control room against increasingly determined assaults. The Conclave forces adapted quickly, adjusting their tactics and equipment to counter her advantages. A grazing shot from an energy weapon seared across her left arm, burning through her armor and into flesh. Jensen ignored the pain, focusing on maintaining her defensive position. "Captain!" Cho's voice crackled through the comm. "They've cut off my retreat route, moving to secondary extraction point." "Understood. Overload at 60%. Once it reaches 80, it can't be stopped." Another wave of attackers forced Jensen to fall back to a more defensible position behind the main control console. Energy bolts scorched the air around her as she returned fire, each shot finding its mark with lethal precision. Then, abruptly, the assault ceased. In the sudden silence, a single figure entered the control room, the same conclave leader they had observed at the research facility. "Captain Jensen," it said, its voice unnervingly melodic despite the circumstances. "Your reputation is well-deserved, though your interference is unfortunate." Jensen kept her weapon trained on the figure. "The experimental conclave, I thought your organization was disbanded after the genetic modification controversies." The being made a gesture that might have been a smile on a human face. "Officially, perhaps. Unofficially, our work continues with the tacit approval of certain council factions. The potential of human genetic material is too valuable to ignore. You're murdering civilians for research samples. Regrettable collateral damage in pursuit of greater knowledge. Humans are uniquely adaptable. Your Deathworlder physiology contains secrets that could revolutionize genetic science. Imagine species engineered with human resilience, but without your unfortunate aggressive tendencies." Jensen's eyes narrowed. "You're creating biological weapons. We're ensuring galactic stability. Humans represent both opportunity and threat. Your genetic potential harnessed under proper control." The power core's hum had increased to a pulsating throb. Warning lights flashed across control panels as energy levels approached critical thresholds. The conclave leader glanced at the displays. "An overload, clever, but futile. My forces have already secured the primary genetic samples from the research facility. This distraction merely delays the inevitable." Jensen's mind raced through options. The evacuation was still underway. Thousands of civilians remained in danger. But if the conclave escaped with human genetic material, the implications for humanity across the galaxy could be catastrophic. "What's your endgame?" she asked, buying time as the overload sequence progressed. "Biological weapons targeting humans specifically." "Nothing so crude. Rather, we seek to understand and replicate the genetic anomalies that make humans simultaneously so resilient and so dangerous. The ability to survive conditions that would kill most sentient species, radiation, extreme gravity, atmospheric toxins, while maintaining cognitive function. You could have requested research cooperation through diplomatic channels." The being's expression shifted to something resembling contempt. "And subject ourselves to Earth's restrictive ethical oversight, human potential will be realized under proper guidance, not limited by your species' primitive moral constraints." The tactical display on Jensen's wrist showed the overload sequence had reached 78%. 2 more minutes, and it would be irreversible. "Your council representatives won't sanction this attack," Jensen said. "Not when evidence reaches them." "Evidence?" The conclave leader seemed genuinely amused. "There will be no evidence. This colony suffered a tragic reactor meltdown, an industrial accident claiming all lives. The council will send condolences, and life will continue." As if on cue, the facility shuddered as explosions detonated throughout the structure. The conclave's demolition charges, Jensen realized, they were destroying evidence of their presence even now. The leader gestured, and 2 guards entered, dragging a bloodied but defiant Cho between them. "Your companion proved quite resilient," the leader observed. Another demonstration of valuable Deathworlder traits. Jensen's grip tightened on her weapon. "Let her go. Your fight is with me. Neither of you will leave this facility alive, but your genetic material will serve a greater purpose." The overload warning chimed. 80% reached. The sequence was now irreversible. Jensen allowed herself a grim smile. "You've miscalculated. In 10 minutes, this entire complex will be vaporized, along with your forces and any evidence you've collected here." The conclave leader's composure faltered momentarily. "You're bluffing. The blast radius would engulf civilian evacuation zones. I've rerouted the energy discharge. The blast will be contained to Defense Command and the research facility, precisely where your forces are concentrated." It was partially true. Jensen had modified the overload sequence to minimize civilian casualties, but the blast would still devastate a significant portion of the city center. A calculated risk weighed against the greater threat of the Conclave's biological weapons program. The leader studied her for a moment, then made a subtle gesture to its guards. Kill them both. Secure genetic samples before withdrawal. As the guards raised their weapons, Jensen triggered the emergency defense protocol she'd programmed into the facility's systems. Security barriers slammed down, temporarily separating them from the Conclave leader. Simultaneously, she fired her weapon at the guards, precise shots that found the vulnerable joints in their armor. "Cho, can you move?" The major struggled to her feet. Affirmative, though not quickly. Jensen supported her colleague as they moved toward an emergency exit. "Singh, come in. Need immediate extraction from Defense Command Southeast Quadrant." Singh's voice crackled through their comms. "Inbound, 2 minutes. Be advised, enemy forces converging on your position." They made it halfway to the extraction point before encountering resistance. A Conclave strike team had cut off their escape route, forcing them into a maintenance corridor that dead-ended at a sealed pressure door. "Options?" Cho asked, her breathing labored from her injuries. Jensen assessed their situation. The overload sequence had passed 90%. Less than 5 minutes remained before detonation. The Conclave forces were closing in from behind, and their exit was blocked. The ventilation system, she decided, indicating a maintenance access panel above them. It connects to the exterior emergency response platforms. With Cho injured, navigating the narrow ventilation ducts proved challenging. Jensen went first, creating space and helping her teammate through the tightest junctions. They could hear the Conclave forces breaking through barriers behind them, their pursuit relentless. They emerged onto an exterior platform just as Singh arrived in a colonial security skimmer. As they boarded, Jensen looked back at Defense Command. The building was now visibly pulsing with energy, its structural integrity field struggling to contain the building overload. "Get us to minimum safe distance," she ordered Singh, "and contact Dr. Wei. I want evacuation status." As the skimmer accelerated away, Wei's voice came through their comms. "Evacuation 70% complete. We've established a secure perimeter at the spaceport, but Conclave forces are attempting to breach from multiple vectors." Jensen checked the tactical display. "We're 3 minutes from your position and 3 minutes from overload detonation. Hold your ground." The skimmer raced through the devastated city, weaving between shattered buildings and avoiding pockets of fighting. As they approached the spaceport, they could see the massive evacuation transports preparing for emergency launch, surrounded by a defensive perimeter of colonial security forces and civilian volunteers. They landed amid organized chaos, medical teams treating wounded, security personnel coordinating defenses, and terrified civilians being processed for evacuation. Dr. Wei met them at the landing zone, her medical kit slung over one shoulder and a pulse rifle gripped in her free hand. "Captain," she greeted, already moving to examine Cho's injuries. "Situation deteriorating rapidly. Conclave forces have surrounded the spaceport and are jamming our communications with the evacuation fleet." Jensen surveyed the defensive positions. "How many civilians still to evacuate?" "Approximately 800. 2 more transports, if we can get them airborne." A distant rumble drew their attention. Defense Command was beginning to collapse as the power core approached critical overload. "That'll buy us some time," Jensen decided. "Singh, coordinate with colonial security, establish layered defenses focused on the landing pads. Wei, prioritize wounded for the next transport. Cho, I need communications with our ship." Despite her injuries, Cho managed to establish a tenuous link to the Thanatos. Connection unstable, but functional. Jensen activated her command interface. "Thanatos, initiate Protocol Omega. Authorization Jensen Alpha 79. The acknowledgement came as a single tone, the ship's AI confirming receipt of the self-destruct command sequence. Not a decision made lightly, but necessary. The Thanatos contained classified Earth military technology that couldn't be allowed to fall into Conclave hands. As they worked to secure the evacuation, Defense Command finally reached critical overload. The resulting explosion temporarily illuminated the entire city, followed by a shockwave that rattled buildings kilometers away. As Jensen had intended, the blast devastated the areas where Conclave forces were concentrated, buying precious time for the evacuation. First transport away, Singh reported as the massive vessel broke atmosphere. Second loading now. Jensen nodded, then froze as her tactical displays showed new contacts entering the city's airspace. Incoming aircraft, Conclave reinforcements. No, Cho corrected, studying her own display. Different energy signatures. These are Galactic Council peacekeeping vessels. Before Jensen could respond, Ambassador Nora's voice came through their comms. Captain Jensen, I took the liberty of requesting Council intervention when I observed Conclave forces at the research facility. Jensen's surprise must have shown on her face, because the ambassador continued. Did you think I remained idle aboard your vessel? I've been gathering evidence of the Conclave's activities since we arrived. The Council may be bureaucratic, but it does not condone genocide. The arrival of Council forces turned the tide. Their advanced weaponry and superior numbers quickly overwhelmed the remaining Conclave units. Within an hour, the last civilian transport had safely departed, and Council peacekeepers had secured the spaceport. Ambassador Nora found Jensen overseeing the final evacuation of wounded colonial security personnel. Captain, she greeted formally, the Council extends its gratitude for your team's actions here today. Jensen regarded her skeptically. The same Council that expedited our deployment without adequate support? Politics is complicated. Certain factions suspected Conclave involvement but lacked proof. Your mission provided the evidence needed to authorize direct intervention. We were bait, Jensen realized. Nora's expression remained neutral. You were the only force capable of responding in time to save lives and gather actionable intelligence. The Council will now pursue the experimental conclave across all jurisdictions. And the human genetic material they stole. Recovery teams are already securing what remains at the research facility, though I fear some samples were transported off-world before we arrived. Jensen's expression darkened. Then this isn't over. No, Nora agreed. The Conclave's interest in human genetic adaptability represents a significant threat, both to Earth and to galactic stability. In the days that followed, Ophiuchus Prime survivors began the long process of rebuilding. Council peacekeepers established temporary settlements and medical facilities, while investigation teams documented the Conclave's atrocities. Jensen's team, having fulfilled their primary mission, prepared for departure aboard a Council diplomatic vessel. Their final act was to detonate the Thanatos remotely, ensuring its technology would not be compromised. As they stood on the observation deck, watching Ophiuchus Prime recede into the distance, Dr. Wei joined Jensen. The colonial governor asked me to convey their gratitude, she said quietly. Conservative estimates suggest your actions saved over 3,000 lives. Jensen nodded, though her expression remained troubled. And how many did we fail to save? That's not a productive metric, Captain. Wei replied with gentle firmness. We did what was possible under impossible circumstances. Before Jensen could respond, Cho approached with a data tablet. Captain, I've completed analysis of the Conclave communications we intercepted. There's something you should see. The display showed a decoded transmission, coordinates and tactical data for multiple targets across human-settled space, each marked with the same designation, genetic acquisition priority. They're planning more attacks, Jensen realized. Worse, Cho corrected. This suggests they already have operatives in place at these locations. Ophiuchus Prime may have been just one component of a larger operation. Jensen studied the data, her mind already shifting to tactical assessment. We need to alert Earth Command immediately and request redeployment to these coordinates. Singh, who had joined them, nodded grimly. Back into the fire. Always, Jensen agreed, her resolve hardening. As long as the SOS keeps coming, Earth will send its Deathworlders. As if in response to her words, The communication panel near them chimed with an incoming priority transmission. A new distress signal, another colony, another plea for help that the council would debate while lives hung in the balance. Jensen exchanged glances with her team. No words were necessary. They were already moving toward the communication station, already planning their next deployment. The SOS was clear, and the Deathworlders would answer.